Dom, how are you?
Are we recording now?
Yeah.
Already? Excellent. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's been a busy week.
Yeah, it has been actually, yeah. November.
How are you guys doing out there? It's good to see you too.
Thanks for joining us back to NAS Cafe. And we made it through October Security Month.
We did.
Yeah, and now we're worrying about network assessments.
That's right.
So we have a couple of things that we want to go over. Maybe one is why you might want a network assessment, but also talking a little bit about some of the things that we found when we did network assessments. So maybe I'll leave it with you, Dom. We've got a few points that we wanted to get across, but why are network assessments important?
You know what? I think it's maybe one of the most important times in history that we have as being responsible for IT, that the network assessment is maybe the most valuable thing we can do nowadays. I feel like everybody kind of needs to do some level of assessment on a regular schedule.
Is it recommended to do it annually, semi-annually?
It really depends on, I guess, what your business is like and how regular you're doing these types of things, right? I want to say, usually when I'm visiting a lot of sort of mid-sized to smaller-sized companies, IT has traditionally been neglected. So there's maybe not been an assessment for a number of years, maybe even more than 5 years. So, I would say we're behind the ball there. But in other cases, there could be companies that are doing network assessments of some degree multiple times a year. And I think that is, some might see that as extraneous. Either way, some attention is due, some attention is necessary, and I want to say let the level of technology that your business is leveraging kind of align with how often maybe you should be checking things, right?
Maybe in simpler terms?
In simpler terms, do it as frequently as you can. And if you haven't done it in a while, you're probably overdue. That's
probably an easy, thing to remember. Why are they important? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, there could be many reasons to consider an assessment. I want to say, we could talk an hour about just why and why some people have different reasons. From, a staff turnover, right? My particular IT manager or my IT vendor or my particular partnership has had some change. I want to know what's my state of affairs today. Change in leadership. A change in leadership may designate I would like to know a new thing about my IT that we maybe never considered before. And that we're going to come up with that, I think, in some of our later discussion today. But probably most top of mind is going to be, what's my security landscape look like today? With the economic uncertainties, with the risks and the threats on the rise consistently, that's the first thing that's on my mind. I want to know that I'm protected and safe, that my business can continue, that I can sleep at night, right, have some peace of mind. And really the best way to be certain of that is to look closely and have an assessment with I would say specifically, with a third party that you can trust.
Maybe those are some great reasons. I would think sometimes the business strategic direction may change or start to outpace some capabilities of maybe the existing team or the existing infrastructure. Sometimes it's not always a human resource issue. It's a systems resource issue, and maybe not enough emphasis put into infrastructure. So an existing IT team may be handicapped to some degree.
That's a really good point.
I was just thinking that when we did our review of an insurance company, the end result of that was not necessarily that things were bad, but things weren't necessarily optimum. Right, and then they had multiple locations, quite a few of them, in fact, and then every location had a different network setup. So there was no consistency because they didn't actually have an IT group. They were kind of like, they had offices in many cities.
Yep.
That's the type of organization.
Pretty common.
Pretty common, yeah. So when we got in there and we reviewed everything, we found that just by reorienting what they had to bring it into standards, part of the network assessment pointed out that they had a lot of misalignment in just the way things were deployed.
Yep. We
were able to actually remove a lot of their issues that their end users were, we'll say, complaining about. For example, slow speeds or unable to access, HQs, network resources, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And that was all done through just that regular network assessment
right.
that we did.
Yeah.
And we were able to actually, we found on the cost side, because network assessments don't only focus on the technology, they also focus on the billing and the cost centers, like
Yes.
which vendors that you have.
Yep.
We were able to actually have a 10-month return on investment of all new infrastructure at every site by putting in new switches, new cabling, new routers. And that was from the cost cutting that we found on some of the telephony spend,
Wow.
on some of their unused internet that they weren't using.
Hang on a second.
It was that significant.
Can you break that down again? So, because for one reason or another, you're saying that there was like extra phone lines, extra equipment, extra monthly services that were essentially not needed? And through the assessment, we were able to find such an amount of savings that we could put new equipment at all the sites.
At all sites. Yeah.
And it was basically paid for within the
I'll
first
give you
year.
one example.
Wow.
So HQ had a PRI.
Okay.
A PRI is 23 phone lines.
Very
Half-
technical.
Yeah, half weren't working.
Oh, I see.
So they weren't even on.
Oh, no. And they didn't know.
They didn't even know. So then,
There's a good reason to look.
So 12 were working.
Yep.
And when we investigated the line capacities, we said, well, let's just test how many lines that were coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And we found that their peak calls were 6
Not even half.
at HQ.
Wow.
So they were paying for 23 lines, half weren't working, and of the half that were working, they were only using half
That's
the
a
capacity.
massive savings right there.
So it's like, well, you don't need this type of service delivery. They were oversold something
Right.
like just historically.
Yep,
And they
yep.
just kept it and worked with it, and something ended up failing in the technology somewhere.
Because there wasn't a regularly scheduled assessment, it just went under the radar.
So just to maybe step back a little bit about why that particular customer asked us to do the network assessment
Sure.
was because there was actually a change in IT. So there was a person that kind of took care of the IT that left, and the ownership or the executive group just didn't know. So they just said, can you just come through and then do an audit,
Right.
figure out what's working, what's not working, because we have these complaints from people that, they just were unresolvable.
Right.
And that was one of the examples that we
That's-
came across. So it's
that's
a very positive experience. And
that's really key.
And it wasn't necessarily that somebody did something wrong.
Right.
It was just, okay, well, the bill wasn't really reviewed, and it wasn't verified to see, well, do we need this? Is it actually working?
Common.
That's a big thing.
Isn't that, wouldn't you say that's very common in businesses that have more than one location?
Yes.
There's a confusion about who owns what with respect to like authority. Like who's owning all of the phone bills? Who's owning all of the internet bills? Who's owning the budgeting or the planning for IT? And I found myself just also involved in these type of assessments that it's almost different everywhere, and almost nobody really knows who does it belong to in the sense of who's in charge of it, who's really auditing these bills, and it's always thinking, oh, the other person's checking, and meanwhile, until we really look and make a concerted effort, it isn't being looked at, and we don't know what we're missing. So yeah, I want to just re-emphasize how much more important is it now, having seen just in our landscape here, like, the city of Hamilton went through a dramatic breach and problems that affected, I want to say, not only maybe tens of millions of dollars, but also tens of thousands of people. That's a great example.
Nobody could rent a book
Right. And
in the library.
That's big. I mean, and we couldn't tell when the buses were coming and going. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot there.
That was a big impact.
So,
But what do you think, would a network assessment would have helped in that situation?
before,
Why?
great reasons. So you know what? That's maybe the meat of it. And like I was just saying, the most important one to me is security vulnerability assessment, right? So just having, even if it's not the most fine-tooth comb, I need to know from a high level certain things are in place that are going to protect me, right? And do we have, like we talked in our last video where we talked about antivirus and EDR and MDR and sort of next generation security tools, are those in place? Good. Phew, I feel pretty good about that. What about my business continuity? Are my securities in place in the sense that my backups are being tested? I'm have peace of mind about if something were to somehow breach my security defenses, I can considerably recover. So those would be the main driving forces. And I think what we heard is there was data loss and they were unrecoverable systems that were affected, right? So having an assessment to look and find that, we would say, okay, let's fix that now.
No, we can't like really without of being there and
Sure.
understanding an intimate
Right.
understanding of things.
I don't want to
we
scrutinize
couldn't.
them in particular.
We can't really comment too much about maybe how the things were run, but it does bring to question is like, okay, well, was there an out of band management network set up? In addition to, for example, the local network, or when somebody got in through that local network, were they able to bridge into the management network?
Right.
Like they should be separate. That's one of the things that a network assessment might uncover. I
Hopefully, yeah.
had a question just a little bit off of the security risk, but cloud integration. Have we come up across reasons why a business may want to consider a network assessment for looking at maybe outsourcing some cloud services?
Yeah, big time actually. So that's a really good point too. And it's maybe not just cloud, but it's hey, I'm taking on this new plan, this new project. I might be acquiring a business. We might be launching a new initiative, right? Are my systems up to the task? And so that's a great thing to know. Where can I fit in my ship? Do I need a bigger thing? So the most common one that I've seen is really we want to launch this new application because we want to be able to leverage more analytics from the data that we have. Can you make it run on my system? Well, and very commonly it's in camera systems, right? Newest camera systems are very, very intelligent and have all sorts of AI built into it. Same with sort of like Power BI and some of the data analytics. The same concepts apply. New technologies leveraging AI to be able to take my data that I have and give me new information about my customers, give me new opportunities into specific
Those
markets.
would be like outsourced data mining?
It
Is that what you
maybe
mean?
no. In some cases, I would say it's can we do it on our existing equipment?
Okay.
Right. So then, maybe you can, but only this much. If you really want to leverage it, we need to put that into the cloud, or we need to bolt on some type of thing. Without doing an assessment as far as capacity and performance and stuff like that, we would never know. And making an executive decision based on, I'm not sure, this sounds like a good idea, let's just try it, it could be disastrous in the sense that it could potentially cripple existing systems. So it is good to know for sure what's the right strategy here. How can we move in the right direction, and how can we ensure that this is going to be a successful implementation of whatever that might be, right?
Okay.
So,
Well, we've got a few reasons here. Thanks for the quick chat, Dom. Without going into it, I know this is a big topic. We
Yeah.
could talk about it for a while, so
No doubt.
maybe we can do some subsequent chats about parts of that. But a couple major houses: cost cutting, security awareness, verifying your backups. So it's pretty common that we find that backup systems aren't actually working, and then unresolved issues.
that's right.
Some of these things is like, how come we could never really get to this issue?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a skill thing or lack of understanding what the actual problem is. Not enough questions.
A holistic approach
yeah.
too, right? Like an expanded purview.
Yeah, and there was one other thing that I wanted to comment about, just about network assessments before we close off here. But we find that when we go into an organization, not everybody likes to complain about their problems. They live with that slow laptop, or they live with the mouse that's not working right, or they try to get into an application and it's slow, and they just don't want to bother their boss or their coworkers with this problem that's been there for years, and they just live with it. And what we find sometimes when we go in is we actually uncover some of these problems that have been there, and some of the questions have been, well, hey, Mary, why didn't you tell me about that before? And then we would have looked into it. But
Yeah.
anyways, just a network assessment is a good tool in the IT tech tool bag to go in, assess, and uncover some issues. And then it's also used for building a concrete roadmap over the next 3 to 5 years to say, hey, here's a lot of the parts of the things that we can kind of swallow, prioritize them based upon whatever the business metrics are, and you can absorb them that way in a much more manageable way.
Ain't that the truth?
Anything else you wanted to share?
That's it. I think it's just great to shed light on the need and why it makes a lot of sense. And I want to say, don't be afraid. I think the best way would be afraid of not doing it. and really question, hey, I haven't assessed my stuff in a while. Maybe I should. And I really encourage everybody in any type of business, the best thing that's going to happen is you're going to learn how to make things better. And who doesn't want to do that?
Well, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Yes. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.